Welcome to episode 23 of the Everyday Sens podcast. I'm Jack Richardson, joined by Brennan Parks. Brennan, we were just talking. I feel like I just saw you. Obviously, we did our live stream last night, and it did really well. We had a lot of people joining us live on YouTube. We still people are watching us. So if you haven't seen that, go check that out. It's our live reaction to the Alex DeBrincat trade. This is going to be a we slept on it kind of reaction, right? So we are talking again this morning on Monday morning. So how you doing? How did you sleep on everything? And just a lot to process with this deal.
It is, yeah, and I didn't sleep quite as well just because I actually stayed up pretty late doing a jersey swap for Kubalik, so that's going to be posted when we're done here. But yeah, I feel better about it today, and I honestly didn't feel upset about it yesterday, so I feel in a pretty good spot. And I think a lot of that just stems from the fact that I was just mass tweeting to the point where I had to start deleting tweets because I just was filling everybody's timeline. But when you do, I was doing mock lineups, and this is without signing anyone, and I was liking the look of it. It looks really nice, and I think they're going to add another piece. So although I think we'll get to the outrage on Twitter and stuff, I'm pretty content with where the Sens are at, and I've got a few tweets that demonstrate it where, the most common lineup last season was ridiculously bad. I'm sorry, but based on injuries and stuff and based on games played, we had Dylan Gambrell on the third line for more games than not. So looking at where they project this season makes me happy. I know we can talk about value with the DeBrincat trade and maybe the risk didn't pay off of acquiring him, but if we're being optimistic, which is, I don't always want to be optimistic, but today I'm feeling optimistic. And so I look at the lineup and what they look like, and I'm excited, I think there is excitement ahead. And I think this team projects, before even adding anyone else, I think they project much better than they did last year.
100%. And it's all about the blue line. The blue line was the thing they didn't need to even touch this offseason. Two biggest needs were goaltending and middle six scoring depth. And they've addressed both of those now. DeBrincat is, he was a top line player playing in their middle six, essentially. So they take him out. Now you have another hole in your middle six, but we'll address that. The Sens have room to do more. I would be stunned if they don't try and do more. I'm sure they are. They're linked to some players that are still free agents, and with trade, anything's possible. Prospects that are coming up can fill in that role as well. It's not doom and gloom. I understand disappointment for a lot of fans, but I want to put it like this, and I'm going to use Ian Mendez's analogy because I thought it was perfect. He has an article in The Athletic this morning, awesome perspectives just on both sides where there doesn't need to be a bad guy in this situation. I think both you and I kind of agree with that. DeBrincat is within his rights. The Sens had to do what they had to do. So Ian put it like this. He said, this trade, most of the fans were saying it's all right. It's meh or neutral, right? Good, not great is kind of the way I'm putting it. Ian said it's not a home run or a strikeout, but it's a ground rule double is what he called it. And what happens at the next at bat is going to determine if it's a good trade or not. I think it was a perfect analogy to throw it in baseball terms because it's true. And the next at bat is now what they do with that first round pick, what they add in free agency if they can still. So I'm excited. I'm not overly optimistic, but like I said last night too, I'm comfortable with the lineup they have now because they address goaltending. They got middle six help from this trade, and quite honestly, they've sort of, and I say sort of just because it's not obviously equal, but DeBrincat's production last season was not up to the par we wanted it to be, and that's just a fact. He played well. It could have been there, but it didn't happen. We talked so much about the November stretch where he could barely score and the Sens could barely score. They lost 7 games in a row by 1 goal if you take out empty netters. DeBrincat scores 3 or 4 goals in that span. They're probably a playoff team, right? So by doing this trade, Kubalik is a downgrade on him significantly for sure. But the production, they kind of replaced the production DeBrincat provided last season, and it's on a little bit of a lesser scale. So through that context, it's a very optimistic look at it. I think it's great. I've come around a lot on Dominik Kubalik. I'm excited. I think he's that highlight pack you put together and threw on Twitter. By the way, we didn't even mention Everyday Sens account on Twitter, 10,000 followers. So that's a big milestone there for you on the Twitter account. That's pretty amazing. But yeah, so a lot of optimism for me after sleeping on it, and I am comfortable with where they are. This was I don't want to say best case scenario in the DeBrincat trade, but certainly could have been a lot worse. Let's put it like that.
I agree, yeah, and I'm just going to throw up that lineup based on games played from last year. So you had Tkachuk, Stützle, Giroux, DeBrincat, Pinto, Batherson, Joseph, Gambrell, Brassard, Kelly, Kastelik, Watson. That was your forward group, let alone the rest of it. But Yeah, like if you look now and we talk about that same first line, and then you put Kubalik, Norris, Batherson, like even just having Norris there and moving Pinto down to the third line, like the depth and everything looks better, does it not? I know they still should add another piece, and the bottom six is still needs to be shored up, but like I just see a lot of excitement here. I see a lot of optimism. But like you said, the biggest thing, and something that I don't think people even consider for some reason, is how much better the defense is going to be. Like the most common defense last year, and even Zub missed, almost half the year. But Shabbat, Zub, Sanderson, Hamonic, Brandstrom, Holden, like that, those guys played the most games of any 6 defenders on the team. So obviously you're still going to have, 4 of them, maybe even Hamonic, but like Chychrun is a number 1 defenseman. So you add him in. I know the frustration stems from the value of the trade and the risk, right? But like, I don't know. I don't find it very hard to be optimistic right now. Like I'm totally fine. And I don't really know what people were expecting with the DeBrincat trade necessarily too, because don't get me wrong, I tweeted right before it happened. I said for this to be an A+, and Detroit fans were just so obnoxious last night. Like I am just, I can't even handle it. But I tweeted, oh my God, it's unbelievable. Yeah. Like, but anyway, I tweeted right before it happened, like for this to be an A+ for Ottawa, they would get Berggren, Soderblom, or Soderblom plus another high value asset. And that's just in regards to value. I know you, I like Kubalik too. I just mean value wise, like those guys have more value based on their agent upside. They didn't get them. So to me, it's not an A+ for Ottawa. Like I'm not going back on that. I don't think it was an A+, but I don't think it even had to be an A+. Like to me, it's a B or a B- trade based on value. And even B- is kind of low for me. I think that first round pick has a lot of value personally. I think that's being overlooked as kind of a secondary piece when it's the main piece. But although it wasn't an A+, I totally agree with Ian. Like it wasn't a strikeout either. They did fine. The lineup is not hurting because of it. And I think you tweeted this too, but because we've known DeBrincat is going to be gone for a while now, it hurts a lot less. If this just happened out of the blue and the 1-year deal thing was still very much like they were preaching it was a possibility, and Dorian was still saying like, yeah, I think we're just going to wait this out and see what happens. Like that hasn't really been said. It's been pretty known here for a while that DeBrincat was going to be out the door. And to me, I know we don't want to consider him the enemy. And I think Ian, we referenced to Ian a lot here, but I think that he actually wrote an article basically saying like DeBrincat wasn't in the wrong. And I agree. He was in the right. We've said that. He was in his right to want to look at the market and test free agency. He was going to make more money. Now, he'll get another big contract in 4 years. But like it's still sports, and I'm still gonna be bitter, and that honestly makes it easier for me to accept. Like I don't want to label him the bad guy. He was within his right, but he also signed for 4 years at less than $8 million after essentially saying to Ottawa, it's 8 years at $9 million or nothing. Like that's what the reports were anyways. So I'm not making him the bad guy, but it makes me feel a little better knowing that like, listen, I was really rooting for Cat, and he wanted to go home. He wanted to do things for his family. That's fine. But yeah, I feel a little better knowing that, he probably didn't want to be here either as much as he wanted to test the market, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, the fact that it's with the Red Wings, and you just mentioned Red Wings fans and all that. I also, we both tweeted a lot. I tweeted a lot this morning, actually, just after I'd sat on it, slept on it a little bit. And the thing with the Red Wings is I put it in this context of if the Sens had done this last summer, and it was more a trade like Connor Brown, Thomas Hamara, just kind of same level as Sabrango, let's say, left shot D. I just kind of pulled that out of my hat. Conditional first and a fourth. If we traded that last summer for DeBrincat, we would have been over the moon as well. And quite honestly, yeah, the 7th overall pick has a lot of value. It's nothing you should scoff at. But the place that Ottawa was at the time last summer, that pick didn't need to happen. And the place that they are now, picks aren't huge, and they obviously probably could have gotten a ton of futures from teams if they wanted to at the draft, which is why that was a deadline. But they've got priorities, and they addressed middle six scoring. I think the Athletic had a bunch of trade grades and gave Ottawa a C-. But if you read what they said, I don't know if I would equate that to a C-. It was Dorian did what he could with his backed into a corner, and I think when you contextualize it with the 7th overall pick and all that, sure, the whole thing can be a C-. But isolated this trade, I think it's a B- at worst, like you said. And it's about the next at bat, like Ian said. It's about what happens next. And whether that's now or trade deadline, how the team does, it all matters. And yeah, you go ahead there.
Well, I think if they sign, like, well, we've got a bit of breaking news for one, but for two, I'll say it in a second here. I know we should get to the breaking, but for what you're saying, like, I agree. And I think that if they, like I said, if they sign a Tarasenko, that should be kind of equated with this deal as well. Like, I'm kind of grouping that in as a subsequent move. But the breaking news is that Sens President of Business Operations, Anthony LeBlanc, resigned on the weekend, effective immediately. So he's gone, and he actually did some pretty good work. He came from Arizona, and he came under Melnyk, obviously, but he did some good work on the business side of things. I think he was a big part in restoring some relationships with the community here after so many bridges were burned. I know he was actually like kind of active on Twitter, and he seemed like a really good guy, genuine dude. So I hate to see him go. Bruce Garriock says, the ownership change just likely meant it was time to leave. So I don't know. I'm not huge on the business side of things, but I'm guessing that this is kind of Andlauer wanting to bring his own people in, but allowing LeBlanc to kind of go on his own terms. Like, he's not firing him, obviously, but he's kind of saying, I'm a new owner and I'm going to bring some of my own people in and fill out the office. Maybe that's not the case, but that certainly seems what that's how it presents to me, is that Andlauer is going to kind of fill out Ottawa's hockey operations roles and business roles himself. So, what do you think about that? Anthony LeBlanc, president of business ops, is resigning right now.
Yeah, I don't want to say, it's kind of surprising. Now is a little weird. I'm sure maybe it happened a couple days ago. I don't know if this is right now stuff. But yeah, I think this is the first domino. I think, like you said, this is Andlauer. Not necessarily, this isn't a firing. It seems he did it on his own terms, but if you have the meetings, I'm sure LeBlanc was in all those meetings with, he's part of the board that Pierre always refers to, right? The board of governors that kind of took over from Melnyk. LeBlanc was, part of that with the Melnyk estate. So I'd imagine that in those meetings, and when he met all the owners, he met Ryan Reynolds, all these groups, he met with Andlauer and perhaps got the vibe and got the sense. And even now, it's been about almost a month now since Andlauer's been officially rumored, which is kind of crazy. Since it's been that long, I'm sure they've had meetings, and Andlauer probably made it known that he's got other things in mind. So he just leaves on his own terms, which you have to respect, obviously. But yeah, first thoughts on LeBlanc, he came and kind of steadied the ship business side for the Sens. I think he had an underrated role last summer when the ticket sales, like, he was great talking about ticket sales last season, and they skyrocketed for the Sens. They got back to a very respectable level, and I think that's a big part of what LeBlanc did. So kind of a bittersweet a little bit, right? I don't think this is a cleaning house that I wanted to see, because you don't really want to see anyone lose their job that isn't super public like this. But I thought when he was dealing with the public, I thought he was really good and came in and steadied the ship with when Melnyk when Eugene Melnyk was still around.
For sure, yeah. And like I said, I think he was a big part in restoring relationships with the community. Like, he built a lot of those bridges that were burned back up. I know too, he was a big part in obviously the team was the main thing, but he had a good role in the marketing in regards to ticket sales. I know ticket sales jumped dramatically under him, so obviously that came with the team. But I think that LeBlanc, and he was one of those guys who was more so behind the scenes. Like, we didn't see a lot of him, obviously, but every now and then when he talked to the media, yeah, he sounded really good, and he sounded like someone who knew what he was doing a little bit. So it does suck to lose him, and I think he was a big part in restoring that, in marketing. Like, he did that stuff, so I'm excited to see who Andlauer brings in. These are guys who you don't often hear of publicly, but they play a big role. Like, there are those integral members of the organization who work behind the scenes, essentially. So sucks to see LeBlanc go. I am curious, and we probably won't find out, but if this was him getting the sense from Andlauer, and maybe he just didn't want to stay, or if it was just kind of Andlauer saying, we're going to kind of clean house here, but I'm not going to fire you. Like, obviously, Garriock said he's going out on good terms, which to me kind of sounds like it was mutual in a way, like not a firing, but it was kind of mutual that he wanted to bring his own people in. So
he was big on just talking about LeBreton. I think he did a nice Q&A with The Athletic a while ago, and very transparent with all of that stuff. I think he probably played the largest role, or part of the biggest role, in boosting the value of this team over the last year to make them $1 billion sale. I think that can't be overlooked either. So wish him nothing but the best for sure. And I'm glad that he's able to leave on his own terms. I would imagine this is not going to be the first one we see, or sorry, won't be the last one, I should say, because I think Michael Andlauer, as he gains control in the next few months here, will start to weed out people who he didn't hire. It'll just happen gradually. So this is the first domino to fall, and wish Anthony LeBlanc nothing but the best. Off ice stuff for the Sens. I had fun talking about the ownership stuff, but it's on ice time for us right now, right? It's the middle of July. We are cooking with a lot of stuff to talk about. We touched on Dominik Kubalik a little bit and how he is middle six scoring help. I referenced, the Athletic doing their grades and stuff like that. And they had their graph with the analytics, and they said Kubalik had a high scoring year, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he had a high scoring year, but here's some stats there for Dominik Kubalik on the YouTube page if people are watching, and it said that he was good middle six scoring help, which is exactly what the Sens needed. They addressed it, and on the surface, for other fans who are saying that, oh, the Sens got fleeced, whatever, sure, but you dig deeper. We're fans. We cover the team all the time. They addressed a massive need that they had, and DeBrincat was a top player playing outside of the top line, essentially, right? And he was going to if he stayed. So it's a good pivot, I think, and I'm not trying to defend the trade or whatever. I don't think it was bad. I think Sens fans, especially, saying this is a dud of a trade, we lost so hard. Like, I think that's just looking nitpick, man. I don't know. I don't see how you can legitimately say this is a awful trade.
Well, and it just, I think people are overlooking that Dorion was so backed into the corner, right? Like he was given 5 teams by DeBrincat originally anyway, and 2 of them weren't even interested, was the report. And the other 3 didn't want to pay him what he wanted. So DeBrincat had to kind of pivot into that lower 4-year deal, which is also notable because that probably lessened the value too, was that he didn't sign. I mean, I don't know. Detroit kind of wanted to sign him for short term, but he didn't get his 8-year deal. So that is notable. This tweet I've got pulled up is just from Prague Senator and Prague Hockey on Twitter, who's obviously from Czechia, and he loves his Czech players. But it's since Kubalik entered the NHL, which was in 2019-20, at 5v5, he's played like 800 less minutes than DeBrincat, and he's actually scored 2 more 5v5 goals than him. And that was including time in the bottom 6 and not receiving the power play time. One interesting thing about Kubalik that I saw when I was looking at his stats was that he doesn't average a lot of ice time, which is a little bit interesting to me. He averaged, I think, like 14 minutes last year, even though he was on Detroit's first line a lot of the time. So I don't know, maybe he wasn't getting a big power play role or something, but he's a pure sniper on the power play. So I'm not sure. I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more. But I thought this tweet was interesting. Obviously, Kubalik's rookie season, he did score 30 goals, so that also helped him just in general. But yeah, that was the Patrick Kane. You know what? Patrick Kane's still a free agent. Let's reunite these two. How about that? Bring Patty Kane to Ottawa. No, that won't happen.
No, he's absolutely
a big
going to the
market
Red
boy.
Wings now.
Yeah. Oh,
he's
God.
going to Detroit.
Imagine
no doubt in
that.
my mind.
Jesus.
Not a doubt.
That'd be
I thought Buffalo originally, he was going to be their Claude Giroux kind of thing, and obviously he's got hip surgery, so he won't be available to start the year. But I thought he'd go home to Buffalo. I'm prepared to deal with Patrick Kane in the Atlantic one way or another, whether it's in Buffalo.
Such a stacked division. Like, come on.
It sucks, man. It sucks. It's I mean, the good news is the Sens are in the mix. They're not out of it now. It's not like last season where they have to get themselves in the mix. They are 100% in the mix now. Florida's cap strapped. Toronto's cap strapped. Boston has half a new team with no center depth. So I'm confident. I'm confident in the Sens, but we'll get into that another day. Just comparing. Maybe we can allocate an episode to each Atlantic team and just stack the Sens up against them and just see where they are.
We could just do a lineup comparison for like each. Once it's a little more settled.
There's been a lot going on with the Red Wings, but regardless, I think with the whole Red Wings situation, I think this is a great trade for the Red Wings, though. I will put it that way. I think this is definitely a win for them, but it's not a loss for the Sens. It's an overtime loss. Put it like that. They got 1 point. Detroit went home with 2. That's okay. That's just the way it goes sometimes.
Well, that's exactly how I see it, which is why I don't understand the hate from Red Wings fans on Twitter. Like, I know that we're, it's everybody loves to kind of toot their own horn and everything, but like, for me, like, I'm not saying the Red Wings had a bad trade here. I think they if we're picking winners and losers, I'd say they won as of right now. But like, we don't have to pick winners and losers because there doesn't have to be a loser and there doesn't even have to be a winner. Like, in my mind, Ottawa's not a loser here. They're fine, and like you said, and like many people have said, I don't think this trade is technically over. Like, we have to talk about the cap space Ottawa's getting. I know they're still tight right now based on signing Pinto, but like for the next 8 years now, they're not spending $9 million on a player, right? Like if they signed him to 8 by 9, which I mean I was almost open to, but like they would have been spending a lot of money there for the next several years, so they would have been tight for that long. Now they're gonna have a ton of cap space next summer. They're gonna have the room to for sure sign Chikrin and Sanderson. So I think that it has to be noted. And also this summer, like we said, if they sign a Tarasenko or a Tatar or anybody else, it kind of is part of this deal because like they wouldn't have been able to if they signed a DeBrincat, right? So we can look at that and kind of get into that. But otherwise, yeah, like I'm excited about Kubalik. I know we wanted to talk about him more. The 5v5 thing is really interesting to me. I did not know that. He also put up some really good defensive numbers the 2 years prior to this one. He was a little lower this year, but like, again, Detroit was not a good team this year. I'm going to try and find my tweet here that I put up yesterday about Detroit. Like they were just terrible in regards to goal scoring and like expected goals. They were among the bottom teams. Ottawa scored the 6th most expected goals for per 60 minutes, which is like means basically they were an offensive powerhouse. Like I think Kubalik's going to come in, and the way I put it was he's going to score a lot of points because he is a guy who, I mean, watching those clips, like he has a ridiculous shot. He's like a Josh Norris light almost. Like he's got this crazy shot. I think you could put him on the point on the second power play unit and use him just like Norris. Like he's going to score a lot of goals from there. So yeah, do you have like, do you want to break down Kubalik a little more? Did you get any more info on him last night? Were you up on your phone in bed kind of watching the Kubalik highlights or what?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have a deep dive. I think those 5v5 stats are awesome to look at because, you think about it, they played on the same team, DeBrincat and Kubalik, for a couple of years, right? So that's interesting. Nice little wrinkle there that they get traded for each other a couple of years later. But so I looked at his hockey DB. He's got 4 seasons in the NHL, and first year as a rookie, 30 goals in 68 games. He had an awesome season. That's the COVID year. That's when it got cut short. He probably could have gotten more than that if they kept playing. The year after that is the other COVID shortened year. He played all 56 games, 17 goals. That's a 25 goal pace. The year after in Chicago, they were dreadful, 15 goals, 78 games. Then he goes to free agency, 20 goals in 81 games on the Red Wings, who weren't a good offensive team last year. Now, that's 2 out of 4 NHL seasons where he's had stellar numbers. I think that 56 game season for Chicago, they were good. They were a good team. I don't know if they made the playoffs. I don't think they did, but they might have been just short
I think
in 2021.
He did play like 8 playoff games or 9 playoff games.
Yeah, he did in that was the bubble.
A point per game.
So in the bubble, he had 8 points in 9 games, 4-4. Like that's nothing to look at either because this is a lineup for the Sens. Once hopefully when they end up making the playoffs every now and then, we're going to talk about playoff experience, and they lack it for sure. They definitely do. Even guys like Chikrin and I'll even say Giroux. I mean, Giroux's, he's a veteran. He's been to the finals, but that was in 2010 or 20. He was a rookie, and they haven't really made a run since. So a severe lack of playoff experience for the Sens. So anything they can get is a bonus, I think. Right? If Tarasenko's new agent is listening to this, then that bumps his price up because he has a Stanley Cup to his name, which is valuable. So anyway, these are great stats too. Look, I think. The thing I want to caution though against is the Ottawa's expected goals for per 60. I think DeBrincat was a huge part of that because the guy couldn't score. So obviously the expected goals are going to go up. He drove a lot of offense, just didn't vary. So I'm curious how that'll change for both teams. Like if Ottawa's expected goals don't line up with this again, and then their production does, maybe Kubalik's just a better finisher. And if Detroit's goes up and whatever, like. It's interesting to look at it through that lens too, but yeah, I'm coming around on Kubalik. That highlight package was nice. I think being in positions to succeed is going to help him, obviously, and that's why I want to ask this question here: where does he fit? Where does Dominik Kubalik fit in the lineup? We've talked about middle 6, so let's jumble the middle 6. It's assuming the top line stays together with Claude Giroux, Brady Tkachuk, and Tim Stützle. So you got Josh Norris, Drake Batherson, Pinto, Joseph as of right now, and then an open spot essentially. Where do you see him fitting? Would you like to see him beside Norris and Batherson, or Pinto and Joseph to start?
I'd like to see him on the second line personally. I think that he's going to produce a lot of points. Even like I do expect their expected goals to go down as well. Like you said, just because DeBrincat did create a lot more than people even like see, but Regardless of that, that ranked 6th in the league. Like that was a huge, huge upgrade on Detroit. Like they were way ahead of Detroit. Detroit's was 26th, I think, in the league. Detroit was not a good offensive team, and yet Kubalik produced what I really like that he produced is the 17 primary assists. So he had 20 goals and 45 points, but 17 primary assists and 8 secondary assists, which means he was very involved. He wasn't just like feeding off of Larkin. He was actually making plays, right? And he was being a good passer. I like him on that line with Norris and Batherson, and I like if you sign Tarasenko or Tatar, I think you can spread it out even more potentially and have roll like a good top 9. I love the idea of Batherson. I know you want to see him with Norris. I love the idea of him on the third line too with Pinto, even though that didn't work great, but Pinto and like Greg or somebody, or even like Giroux, you can spread the whole thing out. Like, I just think you can make a great top 9 and then roll 3 lines that are all like scoring threats. They're not just, your third line's not just a defensive line. It's someone who can actually go out there and put up points. I think that's important with trading DeBrincat now is they don't have the ability to really stack their top 6 at this point, which is fine because balance is if you look at the playoff rosters, balance is what they all use. Like they all friggin' Brett Howden was playing on the second line. Like the Hurricanes had Jack Drury on their first line. Like it's just and all these different players who are not actual top 6 players were playing up the lineup because that's how you succeed is you create a balance. So Kubalik though, to me, I love him on the second line. I really like the idea of him playing with Norris. I know that they both kind of shoot a lot, but I also think that, if you threw even, Batherson's a great playmaker, Giroux's a great playmaker. Tarasenko would be an interesting signing because he's also a shooter. So now you've got like 3 pretty hefty shooters here. But I think that if you put, whoever you put with Timmy's going to succeed, that. So I think even if like I'm open to moving Giroux down a little bit because he's just such a good passer, you could set him up with, him with Norris would be pretty lethal, I would expect. Him with Kubalik, like, again, a lot of options here. We looked at the cap friendly last night. I've kind of got it thrown up again here. We could pop it open again, I guess. I love my cap friendly. This is something.
Shout out cap friendly.
Yeah.
What a website. What
it's
a website.
Just so in depth. Like
we'd be lost without it.
Throw this up. All right. So, like, I know people who are listening not on YouTube they're not gonna be able to see this, but you've got Kachuk, Stützle, Giroux, and then Kubalik, Norris, and then I would put Batherson in that spot right now. And then you've got Greg, Pinto, and then you've got a blank right now on that right wing 3, and then you've got Cruikshank at another prospect, Kastelik, Joseph, and then McEwen as an extra, and then your defense and your goalies. So in my mind, they've got one hole on offense right now. You could plug a Sokolov in there. I know Locked On was asking if people would feel confident basically with this lineup, but with Sokolov on the third line, with Pinto and Greg, I just don't love that, not because of Sokolov, but because of that inexperience. Like, I don't think you can have a third line who their most experienced player is Shane Pinto, who's played 1 year. Like, it's risky to do that, right? So in my mind, if you're going to bring a prospect in there, you need to spread it out a little bit more. That would be my kind of hope. Maybe you move Kubalik to the third and Greg to the second. It's just whatever they do. I think that this lineup encourages me. Like, this is a lineup that I find I'm calling this a playoff lineup. I think that they could really take the next step and solidify that in my mind by signing a Tarasenko or a Tatar. But regardless, like, this is a good lineup. I don't know why people are underwhelmed by this. This looks so much better than it did last year. With the one I showed earlier with Gambrell on the third line based on games played. Like, this looks 10 times better to me, and so I'm fired up. Like, what do you think about this group?
I said it last night, and I think the same thing this morning. I think this is a playoff lineup. I really do. And even if they don't add another piece, and now they've got I know people are worried about only having $5 million to sign Pinto and whoever else. Listen, if Pinto gets 2, that's still what, $3.5 million to work with? That's a lot of cap space. When you think about it, it's tons. Like, that's a lot to work with. It's not Tarasenko money, probably, which is fine. I'd imagine that gets Tatar done if he wants to come here, right? But there's other options. You can trade a second-round pick for a guy who makes $3 million something. That's an option. And I really don't understand why people were really up in arms with the cap space last night. That's really surprising to me. It was the furthest thing from my mind when they made that deal. It was because everyone's mind goes to Tarasenko, and like, yeah, if he's the option, if he's the guy they're targeting for sure, you probably have to move some stuff around. Pinto's probably gonna have to you got to work all that out. But I don't know, man. Like, this is a good lineup now. When healthy, a great lineup. I do still think I like the center depth. When the Ottawa Senators are healthy down the middle, it's formidable. It really is, because these are Josh Norris is probably a first line center too when he's at his full potential. He was, and then he got injured, and Tim Stützle just went off. So I like that a lot. I think, I mean, I'm comparing to Detroit, but JT Compher's their second line center right now. He's a good player. He had a decent year in Colorado as the second line center, but I take Norris over him any day of the week. Like contract included. I don't care, right? In Buffalo, who is it? It's Dylan Cousins and Tage Thompson's the center. I think that's a good comparison. We'll talk about Buffalo. I think I'm worried about Buffalo. I'm not going to lie. They scare me, but
I think Ottawa projects nicely though, like even against Boston now without Bergeron and Krejci, right? Like,
yeah, dude, their top line center is Pavel Zacha if they don't come back, right? That's and he's a good player. Don't get me wrong. It's not nothing against Zacha. He fit well with the Bruins, but that's not a top center. That's not a first line center in the NHL, and you need one to win in the playoffs. Vegas proved it. They were a great team. Their first full season with Jack Eichel, they won the Stanley Cup, and that's not a coincidence.
No, it's not. Like, I completely agree with you, and I think that Ottawa's center depth is great. They just have to stay healthy because Norris has his injury issues. Pinto missed a whole season with injury. Gets you a little nervous, but again, like, we're just counting on being healthy this year. I mean, there's nothing else you can do. So, regardless, like, I don't know. I'm raving about this group a little bit. I know that the value, like we said last night, that you would make the DeBrincat trade again. As would I. I mean, I think that it's a risk/reward business, you know, like that's what the NHL is you have to take chances. And for Ottawa last year, the DeBrincat trade was not just about getting DeBrincat, but it was about proving something. It was about proving to the fans of the Sens, but to the whole league that the Sens were serious. And as you said, I think that coincided with Claude Giroux, you know, signing in Ottawa. Like he referenced it when he signed that, you know, the team is making moves to compete. And that's something that him as a free agent wanted to see because it shows that they want to actually, you know, take this seriously and contend. They're not just a cheap team who never is actually going to compete for the cup. So I think that, yeah, that move made sense to me. It sucks that DeBrincat's gone and that they're losing that elite level player. But I think that Kubalik is a type of like replacement level guy who not even like he's a better player than average in my mind. I think he's brings more than the average player would bring. And now it's just about filling out the depth. Like with this group, they've got $3 million in cap space. So again, if the Leafs buy out Murray, that gives you another $1.3 million. So now you're up to like $4.3 million. Now we're talking Tarasenko money, right? I mean, now you're into it. If Pinto takes a bit less, you could get closer to $5 million. Like there are ways here to make the cap work. I'm not stressed about the cap. And frankly, if they want to sign Tarasenko, I am not at all in the boat of, because of this move, they're not going to get Tarasenko. I don't think it affected it at all. If they want to get him and he is willing to come here, they're going to sign him. It doesn't matter if they're over the cap a little bit. They can move money around. Like you're not going to miss out on a potential 25, 30 goal scorer in Tarasenko, who is a pretty good DeBrincat replacement, by the way, because you're going to be $1 million over the cap in the offseason. Like it's just, that's not logical. If they want to sign him, they're going to sign him. And I think Sens Chirp too, by the way, said they were very in on him from what he's hearing. So something to watch. But anyways, yeah, I mean.
So
yeah,
can you actually do me a favor here, just for people watching on YouTube? Can you slide Matthew Joseph up to the third line, please, for me? Yeah, and just throw McEwen, I guess, in that fourth line. Okay. I like Matthew Joseph, and I'm on his train. Obviously, if they sign Tarasenko and need to sign Pinto, Joseph's the first guy to go for sure, money-wise. Because the next candidate's probably Forsberg, and I'm not doing that in a million years. So it'd be Joseph.
Could be Zub.
no, man. Maybe, I mean, God, they just got the defense right. It can't be Joseph, it can't be Zub. So for Joseph, if money works, and it still can, like you said, that's $2 million for Pinto. That's 3 point whatever in space, $3 million in space. Tons of money still to get a guy who could play your third, second line. With Joseph, I believe he will bounce back. And he actually, production-wise, he had a bad year. He didn't play terribly. And I think we talk all this time about the third line being trash and all this and all that. He was on it. He was playing with Dylan Gambrell and Patrick Brown by the end of the season, right? He was injured. He had inconsistent health, right? Him and Zub actually both missed significant time twice, like separate times this season. I really, really think Joseph is going to bounce back. The reason I like him in that spot, when you have that top nine, you now have the opportunity to jumble the entire top nine around, because everyone likes to make a big deal about how they gave Joseph too much money, too much term based on 11 good games with Norris and Tkachuk. And yeah, that's true. They did. It was not at the time, not a great contract. It was an absolute win for Joseph and his camp. If Joseph can play with Norris and Kachuk, like we saw, and he's done it. No reason to believe they wouldn't be able to do it again and find that chemistry. That's insane value for that top nine, because then all of a sudden you can just jumble everything together like you need to in the playoffs. We've talked about it, and it's going on Twitter right now. Locked On was talking about it too with their, because they put out that lineup if you're comfortable with it. And if Joseph, Brett Howden was on the second line for the Vegas Golden Knights and they won the cup. That's how you have to win in the NHL. It's a strong fourth line. And again, I think Kaslik is a good fourth line center. He should be in that spot. That's his spot. Center depth is locked down. Figure out the wingers. That's where you figure your 10-minute a night fourth line. The top nine needs to be able to jumble around. They should all be playing even time, essentially, at even strength, right? 15 to 18 minutes each a night. That should be the overall. But the even strength of time on ice for that top nine should be equally distributed. With Joseph there, if he's producing at 5-on-5, that's huge. It is massive. And I really do believe that he's not just a write-off that some fans are saying he is. I really believe in him. Now, one more bad year if he's back in Ottawa, whole other discussion next summer. Because again, heads are going to roll if this team doesn't make the playoffs. And if he's not producing and they don't make it, out of here. That's a whole other discussion, though.
Well, we're going to do bounce back candidates at some points in the near future. And I'll tell you, Matthew Joseph is high on my list. He scored no goals at 5v5, but like we talked about it, there were 4 players who had a positive goal differential at 5v5, and he was one of them, right? Like he I think it was a +2, and it was Giroux, Brassard, and Zub that were the other 3. So it was like a select group, right? And he did well defensively. He spent the most time with Tyler Mott, which was by far the most, Shane Pinto, and Dylan Gambrell. Those were his kind of 3 common line mates. And so obviously Pinto is good, but again, Pinto was a rookie too. He wasn't like a super high play driver or anything. And I mean, if we're talking Gambrell and Mott, like what are you gonna do? Like there's not a lot of offensive potential there. I think Joseph too, he was a key penalty killer for them, right? I think did he lead them in penalty shorthanded goals, or did Tim? I think he had 4.
I think no. Joseph only had 3 this
3,
year. 2 were on the penalty kill, and 1 was on the power play.
Okay.
So Stützle definitely had 4, I think. So he led the way.
Okay, yeah. So, but anyways, regardless, I think that Joseph, he provides that kind of, I think he's a good bottom 6 player. Like he's someone who he just needs to score at 5v5. Like if he would have scored 3 goals at 5v5, people would see him totally differently. It was like DeBrincat, if he would have hit 70 points. It's just perspective. But like obviously he had a down year, but it happens. I'm just hoping that he didn't, have the down year because he signed a big contract and now he's kind of, letting off a little bit. But regardless, I think that he's someone who wants to win. He seems like a competitor. He seems like a guy who's going to put it on the line. And again, it's not like his effort wasn't there. Like the positive goal differential really speaks to that. And he's obviously like a physical guy. He's fast. He provides that threat that Formanton kind of did with the speed. They just have to use him. So I would not be opposed to seeing him on the third line personally. I think that he is a potential fit with, Pinto and Gregg, for example, or if you move it around and Kubalik and Pinto, whatever you want to do. I think Joseph is a guy who could plug into that third line. And frankly, I think that he's a guy who I would not have been opposed to plugging him into the first line with Kachuk and Stützle or Kachuk and Norris, because that worked so well for 11 games when we first acquired him. So for me, he's a guy who can play up the lineup. And I think that regardless of a down year, they should be open to that idea, especially if things aren't working earlier in the year. I think they need to mix it up. If the lines aren't working, if you need to, get Giroux on a different line to get them going, I think Joseph is a guy who you could plug in on the first line on the right wing side and just roll with it because it worked so well before. And he's not some offensive detriment. Like, I'm surprised he didn't score at 5v5 because he actually does have some skill and flair. Like, he makes things happen out there and it impresses me a lot with his speed. So I think if you put him with playmakers, he's going to score. Like, he's going to do not to the level he did when he first came here, but he's going to put up. Like, he could be, I think, a 40-point player. Like, I'd be pretty confident in that personally.
I remember distinctly there's a game where DeBrincat was demoted to playing with Gambrell and Joseph, and I think Joseph had a primary assist on a DeBrincat goal. It was in November at some point, and that was it. They never saw each other again. And not that he, Joseph earned a promotion up to there or whatever, but, I mean, they worked. And when he plays with top players, it works. Listen, the whole Nick Paul, Matthew Joseph debate, yeah, it stings, man. I miss Nick Paul too. Everyone misses Nick Paul. He did it all, okay? But Nick Paul played with Steven Stamkos and Nikita Kucherov and Braden Point, like, consistently. And Joseph spent 0 time with Kachuk, Stützle last season, except for shorthanded with Stützle. That was it. So I have full faith in him. I would be look, if Tarasenko's sitting there asking for 5 on a longer term deal, I don't think it's the be all end all. And I would much rather sign Pinto, roll into the season with 3 million in cap space, see how it goes, test the waters, because this is a strong lineup when healthy, which by all accounts they should be. No one's going into the summer with major injuries. They're going to be fully healthy by the start of training camp, at least. So I would roll in with that, and then you've got space. You've got 2 first-round picks. You can make something happen if you need to for that top 9 or whatever it is. I'm every time. Okay, last night I talked myself into everything. I'm even more confident in this group now. This is going to be a playoff team next year. I'm calling it.
I would absolutely agree, and I honestly feel better about it now than I did before the DeBrincat trade, just because we had so much uncertainty, right? Like, it's so hard when the player, you know, he's going to be traded, you don't know when or for what though. So it's like, okay, we can't call it's a playoff team because we don't know like what the roster's going to look like. We now know that they have Kubalik, so that fills one middle 6 scoring role. Now they just need to kind of add one more, and I mean they're not going to waste 3 million in cap space in my mind. They're gonna and that's if they sign Pinto for 2 million. So in my mind, they're gonna at least add somebody, whether it's a depth player or one of the bigger names. But I'm agreeing with you. I think that this is a playoff team, and I get excited when I look at the lineup. I don't know how you can't get excited. Like, look at the defense compared to last year. We started the year with Nikita Zaitsev last year. He played 28 games. Like, look at where they are now. It's so much better. Korpisalo's an underrated signing. People are kind of ignoring him, to be honest with you. When we're talking about goaltending upgrades, Talbot was not a good goalie last year. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I think that they do have some versatility with Joseph too. He actually had 4.7 individual expected goals. So he kind of, whether it was just bad finishing or bad luck, whatever happened, it's similar to DeBrincat in the sense that it's not expected to happen again based on the numbers. I think he's a big rebound candidate for sure. I also think we should talk Chabot, by the way. He had a down year. He also started the year averaging 26 minutes a night, and then he slowly decreased as they brought Chychrun in, as Sanderson stepped up. I think this year Chabot is actually my number one rebound candidate because I think that he's going to be playing. Maybe if he averages 23 or 24 minutes a night, that's a significant difference, if that. A significant difference from 26 or 27 minutes a night. He is a guy who I think is going to really benefit from this new look defense. And if Chabot is on his game, the Sens will have a lot of puck possession, which is going to be the key moving forward in my mind. So, yeah, go ahead.
Thomas Chabot, I did this for people watching on YouTube. He is the X factor for the Ottawa Senators next season. We could dedicate an entire episode to how important he is. But you mentioned Nikita Zaitsev. When Chabot looks over to his right this season to start, he will see another number 1 defenseman in Jacob Chychrun. And Chabot Zub was good too. That's another option as well. You can mix and match that if you want, but that's going to be the pairing. The top 4 is set in stone. I think Pierre said that as well. We talk about mixing and matching the top 9 for the forwards. I think that's fine because people will find chemistry, but you have to balance it. You just have to, especially throughout the regular season. It's going to be a lot of mixing and matching. Defense wise, I don't see a reason if things are working out. I don't see a reason any of the pairings should change from what we've all been putting out from what they finished the year with last year, right? It should be Chabot, Chychrun, Sanderson, Zub, Brandstrom, JBD/Hamonic for all season, the whole season, if everyone's healthy.
If someone gets hurt too, the thing is on defense now, and this is a big kind of underrated point, is I love their depth. Tyler Clevin is a guy who I think will play, I don't know what the over-under would be. I'd say 15, 20 games at least, and maybe that's a little bold. But if someone gets hurt, and based on their history, I would say someone will probably get hurt for some period of time. I think Clevin's the first guy that gets called up. And also Brandstrom can play the right side, and I think he actually likes playing the right side more than the left. So whether Smith actually does that or not, we did see it at times last year, if I remember correctly. I think he's kind of open to that. If someone gets hurt and you slide Brandstrom to the right and you put Clevin on the bottom pairing on the left, you still have a really good look defense. So I know obviously we don't want Chychrun to get hurt or anything, but I love the depth on defense now. If someone does get hurt, they're not going to be in a spot. And it's honestly the same on offense. And I tweeted that as well, is their prospects are in a better spot than they were last year right now. They have a lot of guys who are knocking on the door of the NHL, like Sokolov, Crookshank, even the Yarventi, Reinhardt. These guys are all kind of close to the NHL level of being able to play in a bottom 6 role at the very least. And I think that if they have injuries on offense, which I'm sure they will, you could plug. I'd feel good about plugging Crookshank or Sokolov in if they don't make the team into a role while someone's out for 5 or 10 games. I'd be very content with that. I don't think they'd be a liability at this point. Based on their age and kind of where they are. They both had really good seasons in Belleville, even though Belleville was a terrible team last year. So these are guys who I just think, like, Ostapchuk's another one. It's, Boucher's going to be in Belleville. Now you've got Sabrango in Belleville. I know that people have mixed feelings on him. I still need to look a little more into him before I actually make my kind of evaluation on him, but it's another player, right? It's another guy you have for depth, who could benefit from a change of scenery and be a better fit with the Sens. So I love the depth they have outside. We're not going to be relying on Dylan Gambrell, on Patrick Brown, on these guys who aren't really, they don't move the needle at all. Now we have guys who actually have upside and could step in and provide a little something different. Teams don't have a read on them at all. They're coming in, they're able to actually do things with them. So I'm excited about the depth. I'm excited about the power, the star power on this team. Like, I think they have a great mold right now. And again, I'll say it, I think they're one piece away. They just need to add something with their $3 million in cap space approximately. Right now it's like $5 million. Use that, be a cap team, spend right to it. And then you've got 2 first-round picks that you can use as assets at the trade deadline as well, or you could use them this summer too if you want to get really bold, right? So I think they're in a great spot as an organization.
What's crazy to me is I think both big transactions this summer in the Korpisalo signing and then obviously this DeBrincat trade, the reaction is just completely different from last summer where it was, oh my God, like it was the summer of Pierre. I have a shirt. This is summer of Pierre, for God's sake, right? But it's crazy because I think last summer, I think rational Sens fans too, and not to say not everyone's rational, but excitement was so high last summer that, we were comparing top sixes to the best teams in the league, and it was legitimate too, right? I think now you can't really make that comparison because DeBrincat is gone. That's fair. But I would challenge any Sens fan who doesn't think that they're closer to the playoffs now than they were a year ago. They absolutely are. Absolutely. I think upside on Korpisalo is there. It's goaltending, so you never know. But I truly do believe that their goaltending is stronger than it was last summer. Their forward depth is better than it was last summer going in. I think Kubalik is better than Tyler Mott. Again, they got to add someone, but like you said, all the prospects are a year older. For all we know, Brennan, Tyler Boucher comes in and lights camp on fire and actually just contributes. Because listen, like, he's not the value for a 10th overall pick. That isn't really up for debate. It was a questionable pick and still kind of is. But he was pegged as a third line middle six forward. The Sens need a third line middle six forward now. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Really unfair pressure to put on the kid, but that's a factor. You absolutely can consider that. Look at what Wyatt Johnson just did in Dallas, right? And he wasn't a super high draft pick either. So I think banking on your prospects is not a good thing. They shouldn't, based on who they've got available. But Ridley Gregg, Tyler, like, there's a lot of guys who have the potential still in the system. So I don't want Sens fans to get disappointed if they don't end up signing anyone. But this trade didn't take a step backward. They definitely didn't take a huge step forward. They're neutral, like we've been saying, but it was a good pivot. It's a very, very good lateral move, I think, is what this trade was.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said earlier, I think, like, for me anyway, I expected DeBrincat to be gone for a bit now, so I've kind of erased him from my mind in the lineup regard. But yeah, I think that they definitely did fine.
I saw one rational Red Wings fan, and that was probably it. I'm not going to lie. One. And they said it was tough losing Kubalik. And then someone else replied being like, yeah, you gotta give to take, right? And the Red Wings definitely got the best player in this deal. No doubt about that. He is a top line player who will play on their top line. He will fit probably pretty well. I don't know. The Red Wings are still a worse team today than the Senators are. We both mentioned that yesterday. I got a lot of prospect talk and stuff like that. Hey guys, that's great. But we're talking about the team tomorrow, and the Red Wings are kind of legitimately in the same spot the Sens were last year, in the sense they're banking on Edvinsson being a stud, and like the Sens were with Jake Sanderson. We were right, and I'm sure Edvinsson will be good, but I don't know if it's enough to make the Red Wings a great team. They got to bank on a huge rebound season from Lucas Raymond, because if he's not a stud, then they're screwed. Kind of stuff like that, right? So I think win for Detroit for sure, but if you could make it a win-tie situation, right? The Sens made a very neutral trade that helped them in a need that they needed to address, and yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm just so excited to watch this team play again, because I think the players have to be chomping at the bit right now. It's that part of the offseason where a lot of the moves have made, dust has settled, players go to their new teams, you get Korpisalo acclimated to everything. Hopefully Forsberg is healthy, which is a huge factor as well. But I'm feeling good. We both have playoff expectations and playoff, standard to hold up for this team. That's what we'll do. So that's it for episode 23. We will wrap it up there. A lot of Sens talk from us in the last couple of days, obviously. If you didn't check out our live stream, go check that out. It's on our YouTube page under live. Again, the most viewed video we've had to date, and by a mile. So we thank everyone for that. And please subscribe to the YouTube page because we are quickly approaching 1,000. That was our goal before training camp. I think we can still hit it for sure. We should cruise to that by at this rate. So thank you to everyone for listening. Subscribe to everydaysens.com. Brennan's going to have a ton of articles coming out in the next week, just pumping everything out. And we will certainly be there if another signing breaks for the Ottawa Senators in the coming days. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we will see you next time.